Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the story of Carol Chase McElhenney. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 9 spot, we have this story from Peru. The Marcohuasi Forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found. There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues. In our number 8 spot, we have the old story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground, and everyone had the same green skin. The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave, and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice. Guys, before I continue on in this list, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 7 spot today, we have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What? The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive and they had never actually broken up. Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. In our number 6 spot, we have a story from Reddit that was posted by the user 2humfolk. One day, the writer was driving home from school and began trying to call their boyfriend using the hands-free feature. The phone didn't end up ringing even after 5 separate attempts, so they turned the phone off and then on again and tried one more time. This time the boyfriend answered, but it didn't really sound like the person they knew and loved, and they also sounded like they were pretty freaked out. He said, "Liz, is this you?" Liz kept saying hello, but wasn't getting an answer, and panicked and hung up the phone. Liz tried calling again twice, but there was no ring again. Luckily, on the 3rd try, another voice picked up the phone and asked, "Is this better?" Liz then asked who this was, and the voice responded with something unintelligible, and then they hung up. Liz continued to call the boyfriend until he picked up the phone. Sounding significantly more like himself and not panicked at all, Liz asked who was picking up the phone earlier, and the boyfriend explained that no one had picked up the phone because he had never received any other calls. When Liz got home and checked the boyfriend's call log, they realized that only one call had gone through to his phone. Liz made sure that they were dialing the right number when they were calling, and it was the correct number every single time. Who had been answering the boyfriend's phone? At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quentin. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island. He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension. In our number 4 spot, we have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Torrid, which was on the border between France and Spain. When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Torrid where he claimed to be from. Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day, when they went to collect the man, he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life. In our number 3 spot, we have the story of a man named Jafar Vorin. Jafar was a strange man who just appeared in a village one day before he was picked up by authorities. The language he spoke was closest to German, but even then it wasn't quite the same. Jafar said he was from a place called Sakria and that he was searching for his brother who had been lost in a shipwreck. He couldn't point out where he was from, but was able to tell authorities some geographical information about where he had come from. He explained that his home had 5 separate compartments, or continents, called Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, and Uplar. He couldn't show anyone how he had arrived at the village, and he had no idea how to get home, so he just ended up living out the rest of his life in Berlin. It's crazy to think that maybe he was a man from another dimension and he ended up just getting stuck here. I feel bad for him, and I wish we could have helped him return home. In our number 2 spot, we have the story of Pedro Ramirez. Pedro was driving from a place called Seville to his home in Alcalá de Guadalajara on a November night in 1986. As he went around a curve in the road, he suddenly found himself on a 6-lane highway, and as he continued to drive straight, he saw tall buildings, unidentified structures, and grass that was 2 feet tall growing alongside the road. These were all things that were out of the ordinary for that area. He continued driving, and suddenly Pedro heard a voice that told him he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. Pedro didn't know what to do, so he kept driving for another hour before stopping on the side of the road to take a look around. After a short break, he began driving again, only to come across a sign with 3 arrows pointing in different directions. One was labeled Malaga, the other was Sevilla, and the last was Alcabala. Pedro decided to take the Sevilla route, and after driving down it for a while, he stopped again. When he pulled over and got out of the car, he stood there for a second, and then when he looked back to his left, he saw he was standing right outside of his home. He tried to go back to where he had been before, but couldn't find anything that he had seen before, including the sign with the 3 arrows. Who knows where Pedro was for that while, but I'm very glad that he ended up making it home safely. In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Lorena Garcia. One morning in 2008, Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first it was just small things like her bed sheets and her pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew that this couldn't have been a moment where she just got lost or confused. When she returned home after work that day, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing that she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I kind of believe Lorena too. Starting off this list at number 10. This story goes that a couple were at home just doing some household chores when something super strange happened to them. The husband went to open the front door to toss a dirty rug out of the house, and it was completely pitch black outside. The weird part is that it was 2 p.m. and from inside the house it looked like a regular sunny afternoon with light coming in from the windows. They said that suddenly outside the front door where it was dark, it's like the sun was a light bulb and it went on, then off again, and then on. They described it like the flickering a light bulb does right before it's burnt out. The wife asked the husband if he had seen that, and he replied, "Yes, what just happened?" They also said that there weren't any clouds out either, so it couldn't have been a cloud blocking the sky. Were they transported to some alternate reality for a second? I honestly have no explanation for what the pair witnessed. Moving on to number 9. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. This story comes from a Reddit user called RunnerGirl2001. RunnerGirl was trying to get over an ex when their friend Maggie texted asking if they would be open to going on a date with a mutual friend named Audrey. RunnerGirl accepted and tried to talk with Audrey, but didn't really feel a strong connection and felt like maybe they just weren't meant to be. Shortly after this, more friends began texting Runner Girl about Audrey, even though they didn't really want to keep seeing her. Later that day, Runner Girl ended up zoning out in light traffic and was close to getting in a car accident. They were halfway into the intersection when they realized that they had run a red light, and at the moment they realized they saw a car swerve to not hit them. Runner Girl pulled over after this to process what just happened, and after this specific moment, Runner Girl's friends never mentioned Audrey again. A few months later, Audrey began dating someone else in the friend group named Jake, so Runner Girl assumed that this was why they stopped bringing up Audrey. A few months later, Runner Girl ended up bringing up Audrey to Maggie and brings up how Maggie had tried to set them up. Maggie was super confused for saying, "No, we were trying to set Audrey up with Jake." When Runner Girl went back to their text messages, they couldn't find any that mentioned Audrey at all. In the near-miss car accident, did Runner Girl somehow end up jumping into another dimension? Moving on to number 8. One day a person, let's call them Taylor, was watching TV with their mom and brother while their sister and dad went out to run some errands. While they were watching TV, an ad for a show comes on the screen, and it was one of those veterinary shows. Taylor's brother immediately recognized the vet on screen as his old track and field coach. The brother knew that he was a vet, but didn't know that he was now on a TV show. Taylor had never met the coach before, but obviously thought this story was cool. Later, when Taylor's dad and sister returned home, Taylor went to tell their sister about the TV show mishap. Taylor's sister had also never met this track coach, and Taylor begins to tell the story and asks if she remembers the old coach who had a vet clinic. Taylor's sister replies, "The funny one with the mustache?" Taylor is confused since she's never met him, so asks how she would know he had a funny mustache. Taylor's sister replies and says that Taylor told her about the coach earlier that morning. This of course totally freaked Taylor out because they didn't know what the coach looked like that morning, and also they definitely do not remember having this conversation because why would anyone bring up their brother's old track coach without a reason? I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but something weird is definitely going on. Moving on to number 7. This story comes from a person who often commutes to a town around 3 hours away from the one that they live in. One day they were doing the 3-hour drive with their mom, and they got to this part that takes most of the drive, and it's an area with a lot of mountains and cliffs. They are in the passenger seat with their mom driving, and as they look out the side of the window over one of the cliffs, they see a small community that they had never seen before. This community looked nice and consisted of mostly bungalows, which is apparently not normal for the area. Both them and their mom were super confused as to how they had never seen this community before, but it gets even weirder. They never saw the community again. It just disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Did they accidentally drive into another dimension one day? Moving on to number 6. So one day, this person was driving to work on the same route that they took every single day. They worked the whole day through and got into their car to head back home on that same path. As they were driving, they started feeling super anxious and like on the verge of a panic attack. They kept driving, and then suddenly they see this huge power plant all lit up. They're super confused because they drive this road every single day. How could they possibly miss this glaringly obvious thing? Then their boyfriend calls and asks them to pick up McDonald's on the way home. No problem, they go to the drive-thru. When they get to the window, they see an employee that they've never seen before, even though they're at the same McDonald's almost every single day because you've got to get those chicken nuggets. And this new employee is the only one there and says that they've been working there for around 2 months. They take the food and head home, and when they get there, they begin to tell the boyfriend about this strange power plant that they just saw. The boyfriend explains that the power plant has always been there, so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Now every day they drive past this power plant with no idea how it got there or how they had missed it, but they've also noticed a few other small differences in their life. Their dog doesn't know tricks it used to know, and their boyfriend pronounces some words differently than before. Maybe on their drive home they slipped into a new dimension. Moving on to number 5. This story starts when a person received a camera as an early birthday gift, but there was no SD card in the camera. When they got home, they threw an older SD card into the camera and began to see old pictures and videos that they had totally forgotten about. As they were scrolling through the pictures, they realized that one was a video of their mom with one of their old dogs who had passed away. This was obviously such a treat to see this video that they forgot forgot even existed, and to be able to see their dog once again. They switched to another SD card to see if there were any more hidden gems that they had forgotten about, but unfortunately the other SD card didn't really contain much. When they switched back to the original SD card, they saw the thumbnail for the video with the dog, they selected it, but when it went to load, the screen just suddenly looked like it was cracked all over. They backed out of the thumbnail, and then the entire video just completely disappeared, as well as the fact that now the brand new camera screen was just all messed up. While looking through SD cards, did the camera somehow transport them into an alternate reality where that video was taken? I don't know. This whole situation is super weird. Moving on to number 4. This story comes from a person who works at a retirement home, so they have to get a weekly COVID test. The test takes place in a building farthest from the building that they actually work in, so they drove their car over to the test, parked their car on the lot, but left it running since the test was routine and super quick and easy. At the test, they saw a friend of theirs and offered them a ride back to the building that they worked in. The pair headed out to the lot and realized that their car was still running, but the doors were locked. They searched their pockets to make sure that they didn't have a key, but since the car was still running, this obviously wasn't possible, and there was no spare key for the car, so they ended up calling a locksmith to come and help them out. The pair waited inside the testing building until the locksmith arrived. When he got there, they went out to the car and realized it wasn't running anymore. They thought maybe it had run out of gas or maybe the battery had died, but they felt like it hadn't been that long. The locksmith opened the car door, and when they reached in for the keys, they realized that they weren't in the ignition. This shocked them both because the car was definitely on earlier when they realized that they were locked out. They went to walk back into the testing center to look in there, and after taking a couple steps, they heard the keys jingle in their pocket. The same pockets that they had checked before. Where did these keys come from? Because they definitely weren't in there before, and now they have to pay a locksmith $200 for no reason. Coming in at number 3, this one is another dog story and starts off with a woman who we'll call Anna having her bi-weekly phone call with her mom just to catch up and see what's going on. Anna's mom unfortunately had to inform her that Anna's sister's dog named Honey had passed away. Anna was obviously super upset at this loss and called her sister to check in after hearing the news. Anna had tons of questions about where they were planning to bury the dog, as well as how her sister's son was doing with the loss. Anna told her boyfriend how upset she was about the loss of the dog, as they had a really strong bond. Flash forward a couple months and Anna is heading home for Thanksgiving. Her sister was heading out of town to spend the holiday with her in-laws, so she left her pets at the parents' house so that they could be watched over. As Anna walks into her parents' home, she sees Honey, healthy as can be, just sitting in the living room. Anna was of course overjoyed, but asked her mom why she had told her that Honey died. Anna's mom was super confused and said that that conversation never happened. After leaving her parents' house, Anna asked her boyfriend about it, and he said he was super glad that she brought it up because he also remembered the conversation. Did they somehow enter a world where Honey was still alive? While this would be such an amazing surprise, it would also be unbelievably creepy. In our number 2 spot today, this story comes from a guy who loves cars but had a weird moment about 15 years ago that he just couldn't get off of his mind. When he was in his early 20s, he loved to speed in cars and just wanted to go fast. His friend had a car that he really wanted to drive, and one day it just turned out to be his lucky day and his friend finally gave in. He hopped in the driver's seat with his friend who owned the car in the passenger seat and another buddy in the back, and off they went. They went to an empty freeway around 3 a.m. and put the pedal to the metal. Once they hit around 135 miles per hour, they began to see a bunch of semi-trucks. There were basically 3 driving side by side, taking up all 3 of the lanes, and certainly not going as fast as our speed demon friend. He thought to himself that there was an on-ramp coming up and he would just use that as some extra room to pass, but unfortunately, as he approached the on-ramp, another semi was entering the freeway and occupying that 4th lane. With all 4 semis lined up, he was approaching too fast with no time to brake, so he closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. But then nothing happened. He opened his eyes and the other guys in the car were just as confused as he was. Somehow they were now in front of all of the semis, but there was literally no room for them to have passed by. This was the end of his speeding career, as he was super spooked as to what possibly happened. Was this a real world glitch, or did he somehow enter a reality where he wasn't in an extremely dangerous and potentially fatal situation? And coming in at number 1. One day a guy gets a call from his neighbors asking him if he can help them move a mattress upstairs. stairs. They had a really great relationship with the neighbors, so he of course was willing to help. When he got there, they got the mattress all moved, and then the neighbors asked if he wouldn't mind helping with an armoire as well. No problem, he thought, as he began to help them move that one up the stairs as well. This is when things went awry. There were 11 stairs at the front, he was on the lower end carrying the armoire about 6 steps up, and his friend at the top lost a handle, and the whole thing came crashing down on him since he was at the bottom. He of course loses his balance and falls backwards towards the pavement, and this man actually remembers dying from this fall. The next thing he remembers though is waking up in his dining room with his phone ringing and his wife asking him if he's going to answer the phone. He's obviously super freaked out because he literally just died 2 seconds ago, but now he's here. When he answers the phone, it's his neighbor asking if he can help move a mattress up the stairs. He surprisingly goes over again to help, and when he gets there, he says that he can help with the mattress, but not with the armoire. His neighbor is shocked because he doesn't know how he would have possibly known about this. Did this guy have some sort of premonition, or did his death in one reality bring him into a different reality? Who knows, but I really hope he is taking advantage of his second chance at life.
Starting us off like we always do, in at number 10, have you guys ever heard of the man from Tord? Well, this might actually be a real life time traveler. And this isn't just any time traveler. This is a time traveler who might have come from a parallel universe very similar to ours. Let me tell you guys this story. Back in 1954, officials at a Tokyo airport in Japan were confronted by a traveler from Europe with a passport from a country called Tord. If you guys look on any map and search Tord or try to search for it, well, you'll notice that it actually doesn't exist. So obviously this has to be a fake passport, right? But why would someone create a fake passport with a made-up country? I mean, it's pretty silly. So officials looked more into this claim. The man from apparently Torrid seemed very angry for the holdup, and he was serious when he told officials where he was from. When he was asked to show on a map where this place is located, he wasn't able to exactly point to it because it wasn't labeled, but it was located around here. He circles a place called Andorra. The man stated that this is his 3rd trip this year to Japan from his company that's located in Torrid, his country. He said Torrid has been a country for thousands of years, but officials could not find proof of this claim. The man was taken into a nearby hotel where he was closely monitored while officials figured out this man's story. Like, what is going on? He did have a passport that showed Torrid on it, and the strange thing is this passport actually looked like an official one. Well, the next morning this man seemed to have just disappeared, and there's no way out of the hotel room without being seen. He was surrounded the whole time and monitored. Also, all of the paperwork the officials took in also seemed to disappear. I mean, is this real life right now? Apparently this is a 100% true story. I personally don't believe it myself. I'm pretty sure there's a movie out there based on this as well, based on a true story it says. It's insane. Could this man actually be from a parallel universe? Well, that's a question we may never have answered. From there, at number 9, let's talk about the Mandela effect. Well, this is a theory that maybe some of us have been living in an alternate universe. The Mandela effect is when you think something is one way, but as it turns out, it's something completely different. It's like an alternate reality for some of us. For an example, take a look at this. Do you guys think it's Looney Tunes or Looney Tunes? Is it spelled T-U-N-E-S or T-O-O-N-S? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll give you guys a few moments. Go down there, let me know what you guys think, and I'm gonna reveal it right now. Well, if you guys said Looney Tunes, T-O-O-N-S, well, you might be from a parallel universe because you're wrong. But how scary is that? Like 50% of the population is wrong. Are we all from a different universe? I thought it was T-O-O-N-S. There's no way it's T-U-N-E-S. Here's another one. Is it Berenstein Bears or Berenstein Bears? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, is it Oscar Mayer or Oscar Mayer? Is it Skechers or Skechers? Well, let me know all your guys' answers in the comment section below. Number 8, let's move on to a woman from a parallel universe. I'm talking about Lorena Garcia Gordo. Well, this is her story. On the morning back in 2008, she woke up to discover that there was differences in her life. Differences that made her really wonder if she woke up in another universe. When she woke up, her sheets were a different color. Well, maybe she forgot that she changed her sheets, so not a big deal here. Well, get this. When she went to her office job, a place that she's worked at for the past 20 years, that's when she really noticed like differences. She noticed new people, and she worked for a different department. She was very confused, so she actually called an ex-boyfriend she dated 6 months ago, and she was with this person for 7 years. But when she called the number, she discovered that it wasn't her boyfriend's phone number, and the person she was looking for actually doesn't exist. And at one point she thought maybe she was drugged or had alcohol in her. She's very confused. She's not in the right state of mind due to the drugs. So she went to the doctors, and tests showed that there was nothing inside of her. Lorena had all these memories that apparently never happened. She told her family she remembered a shoulder surgery that her younger sister had, but she asked her, and that never happened as well. Her family thought she was going crazy. No one could figure out what was going on, and how she has all these different memories that just never happened. I mean, detailed memories. Did she wake up in an alternate reality or a parallel universe? This is also something known as the Mandela effect that I was telling you guys about. It's when you remember a lot of things differently that has happened that it actually hasn't happened. But how do you remember a younger sister having surgery and she never did? I mean, I don't think that is part of the Mandela effect. At number 7, we have the boy who lived before.
He used to say when I was a girl I had black hair, or he'd say I used to have earrings like that when I was a girl.
The stay-at-home mom wondered, where was he getting these ideas? Luke's answer changed their lives forever.
Well, this is Luke, who is from Ohio, and he believes he was reincarnated. His past life was a woman named Pam. He said that he died in his past life and he went up to heaven, and then he was reborn again to what you guys see right now, Luke. Well, kids say the darndest things, but Luke's mom was really confused. So she tested Luke in his memory of Pam, and what was revealed was very scary. He said that he died in a fire in Chicago. He said he jumped out of a building. Listen to this.
In March 1993, a massive fire raced through the property, trapping most residents. 19 died, including a woman in her 30s named Pamela Robinson.
Pam had jumped out of a window to her death. I was really kind of weirded out by it at this point.
Is this real life right now? I don't even know how I would feel after confirming Luke's story that he remembers everything about his past life. This kid is only 5 years old. I know they have imaginary stories, but this one went into great detail. He was continuing to be tested, and he was shown a bunch of images of random people. One of them was Pam. She was mixed in there, and he was easily able to pick her out and said, she looks very familiar.
And he pointed to the correct one.
So Pam.
Took me a couple days to wrap my head around it. I couldn't sleep. I thought about it constantly.
The family then looked into Pam's life to see if this is actually a real person, and she was. And then they started comparing her life to his life, and there was way too many similarities.
That Pam was a big like Stevie Wonder fan, and Luke like really likes that era of music. She played the keyboard a lot. And one of the things that Luke, his favorite toy at the time was this little tiny piano that he would tote around with them.
Alright, number 6. This one isn't a story, but it's more of a theory. So let's talk about the theory of having infinity universes. This theory actually scares a lot of people. I mean, the idea that our universe is just so minuscule in comparison to the infinite amount of universes. There's an idea that at any moment our universe could just be erased like in an instant. It's almost like, just imagine the real life Thanos snap, and then boom, everyone on Earth became the victim. There's actually a phobia called aperiophobia. This is a fear of infinity, or even the fear of living forever. Would you guys be afraid if you can live forever? Let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on that. For me, I'm not sure how it would feel. I mean, everyone around you would just be moving on to the afterlife, and you're just kind of here on Earth. Stephen Hawking believed we can live in multi-universes, and it was actually his last paper he wrote before he passed away. So is this idea really that crazy? Well, I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Number 5, we have Godness Allison. She's a YouTuber who has claimed she indeed traveled through time. She went through another timeline.
Hello everyone, Goddess Allison here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about parallel timelines or parallel universes. And the reason for this is because I visited a parallel timeline.
She was taken into another world, and this took place in 2016 in October. She was taken early in the morning between 3:30 a.m. to about 6:30 in the morning, while Goddess spent 3 days in an alternate universe where she stayed in a hospital for 3 days. I think this parallel universe is called the Psychiatric Center. Well, this is a really scary story because people do believe that they have traveled into another universe. And wait till you guys hear about the kid who can actually prove that he lived in another time frame as another person. He's coming up at number 1, so make sure you stay tuned. Well, going back to Goddess for a moment, while watching her video, it's very confusing. I don't know anything she's talking about because I'm not that smart of a person, but to me it kind of sounds like she might be making some things up.
I think after having this experience, I think that we all live in one same universe that operates on the same laws of physics and quantum physics, on the same laws of perhaps geometric fractal, that of the plutonic solids that fit inside each other.
Okay, my brain kind of hurts with all of that information, so let's move on. Number 4.
What I'm about to tell you is something that I haven't even told my children, nor my grandchildren. My own wife doesn't even know what I'm about to tell you.
So this is Alexander Smith, who claims that he has traveled to the year 2118. That's about 99 years into the future. That is absolutely insane, but kind of cool. I would have so many questions for this guy, like, did Elon Musk actually make it to Mars? Did we become cyborgs? Is YouTube still around? Is Top 10 channel still around? Well, this guy's pretty lucky to have the opportunity to know what the future unfolds.
We didn't know if it would work. Sat me in a small room and we had many meetings. I had meetings with various scientists telling me what to expect, telling me what to do during the process of the actual time traveling itself.
This guy actually believes that the government and secret scientists, like the secret society, actually sent him to the future. Number 3, I really don't believe that time travel is real, but then again, there's been events in history and even stories that people have told that might show small signs that traveling to another universe or time traveling might actually be plausible. Have you guys ever seen this picture right here? Well, it's a black and white picture, but if you guys look right over here, you guys will notice that this woman is holding something. Well, that something is a cell phone. Well, let me put this into perspective for you guys. This picture was taken in 1938. Cell phones were invented by Martin Cooper in 1973. He was only 10 years old in 1938, so how was this picture even taken? Well, how does that woman have that cell phone? Phones weren't even thought of. There are many conspiracy theories and scary stories that surround this woman, and why or how she has a cell phone. It doesn't make sense. No one even knows who this woman is. This is a very interesting picture that is just simply unexplained. Maybe she's a time traveler, and Alexander Smith might have actually traveled to the year 2118. Number 2, we have Paul Dinac, who is a Swiss language teacher who went into a coma from 1921 to 1922. When he came out of his coma, he shared a fascinating story with the world. Well, he didn't directly share it. Let me explain. When he came out of his coma, he said that he traveled to the year 3906 AD as a man named Andrew Northman, who was a famous physician. When he woke up, he acquired a great understanding of physics, and he went on to write down his experience in a book he published titled Valley of the Roses. He talked about what the future was like. Earth was able to colonize Mars in about 200 years, but there was a tragedy to the 20 million people living on Mars. So I guess that kind of answers the question we had before. Did Elon Musk reach Mars? I guess it's a no. And if everyone dies on Mars, maybe we should try and colonize somewhere else. The scary part about this whole thing is the fact that Paul's journal entry, which was very detailed, he actually didn't want anyone to read them or even know about them. It was only when he gave his journals to his students they released it to the public, and that's when Paul's story was known. Can this story be real? I guess we're gonna have to wait 200 years to find out if this man was right. Finally, number 1, we have yet another boy, Cameron, who has memories of a past life. Now, this gets crazy. And he's also 5 years old, which is actually the same age as the boy Luke we talked about on this list at number 7. Well, since Cameron was able to talk, he started talking about a past life, a life that took place 220 miles away from where he lives.
I lived in the White House with my mum and dad and my 3 brothers and sisters.
The big problem with that story is that Cameron only has one brother, So who is he talking about? As Cameron got older, his story remained the same. It only got more detailed. He remembers his former parents' name. Many doctors and experts have actually taken interest in this fascinating story. Psychologists has even met with them. They met with Cameron and the family to find out if the story is real or maybe it's just all made up.
Really interesting. Basically, how Cameron describes his world really seems to be quite different from how children with imaginary friends and imaginary worlds describe their experiences.
Cameron, as he got older, kept asking his mom if they can visit where he used to live, and the family over time just said, yeah, let's go. Well, they traveled 220 miles away to the small town to see what would happen, to see if what he's saying actually exists. The mother thought maybe this would convince Cameron that this is just a fantasy in his head, and this past life, yeah, it never happened. Well, he remembered everything. They actually found the house that he described in much detail. If you guys want to see the full documentary, it's really fascinating to me, it's really interesting to me. Well, it's called The Boy Who Lived Before. Check it out on YouTube, it's really good.